And do you know what number I'm talking about, Michelle? A number that I love. A number that's not your fine number, but does change your life.
Your net worth?
Nope.
Oh, wake up, rethink the status quo. When you get your money right, then you're the one who runs your life. Come build a wealthy spirit with Sammy and Michelle.
Today we are going to be talking about retirement tips for a lot of different ages. And I know that sometimes people may be close to retirement and they may be feeling like it's too late for them. How do I know this? Because of our own mother.
Oh, yeah.
I remember I moved in with my parents in 2019 and I immediately noticed that they were spending hundreds of dollars on groceries every week for two people who literally eat almost nothing.
They're peckish, yet they love Costco.
They love Costco. Costco is a dangerous place for people who literally don't eat 2,000 calories a day. If you don't, you need to just order on Costco online and get it mailed to you.
Costco is a dangerous place for any minority person. Every time I go there, I see my other Indian homies who I never see anywhere else in Charleston. And we're all like, no, of course it makes sense to buy 5 loaves of bread here. Yes, I'm a single person, but it's practically the same cost as 1 loaf of bread at Whole Foods.
It's how they keep us down. I decided to bring this up with my mom and dad and have them calculate their finances and their net worth. And they saw in that moment that they had a almost 0% savings rate. They were putting some money into their retirement account, but they really were not saving a lot of money at all. And they were spending tons of money. My parents were immediately defensive. My mom was like, no, we don't spend a lot of money. And I'm like, well, where is it then? And she was like, no, we really don't. When we moved to this country, we barely required any money. And I'm like, yes, that was 35 years ago. And now you are American consumers, just like the rest of us.
It is true. It's crazy how quickly it happens. It's hard to even remember how little we needed at one point. And also now, when we have more of an abundance of money, we actually have the opportunity to put that money towards something. We can invest it. We can grow it. We can retire early.
And Michelle, despite our mom's initial defensiveness, she really took the message to heart. She went to FI meetings with me. She started listening to finance podcasts, and she started saving and investing a ton of money. And now it's only 5 years later, they can retire. It's insane to me. I think it really shows that no matter your age, you can do something to prepare for your retirement. And that's what we're going to talk about today.
Let's get into it. But first, another cool thing for anyone of all ages who flies, our partner AirHelp. AirHelp is with you in those situations in which you find that your flight gets canceled, which happens way more often these days than it used to. Your flight gets delayed an obscene amount. You're stuck in the airport. You're forced to give up your checked bag, turn it into a carry-on because some stupid airlines has a stupid policy that they won't let you on 5 hours before, even though they're the ones that delayed your flight 6 hours. I'm sorry, I digress. AirHelp is super helpful because you're already frustrated, you're already dealing with airline problems, and last thing you want to do is go home and fight to see if you can get some compensation. AirHelp, you give them your ticket information, your boarding pass information, they'll fight the good fight for you, and they only charge you if they're actually able to get you some compensation. So go to our show notes, bookmark the link. Hopefully you don't run into any flight issues, but if you do, AirHelp is such a great tool.
Back to today's topic. Retirement tips for every age.
I love this topic, Sammy, because you described our parents as people who were spending on their money, but it happens to people at all ages.
Our listener, Debbie, gave us this wonderful idea for this topic when she sent over a piece by the Wales Wealth Management Group called 7 Top Retirement Tips. Retirement advice for every age. I was looking through this piece and it had some great tips, which Michelle and I are going to go through today. The first tip for people under age 50, which applies to everybody really, envision your ideal retirement. What do you want it to look like?
Ooh, that is a great tip. A lot of times we don't even think about retiring at any age, let alone what we actually want. I'm a big believer in manifestation and law of attraction, so I think there's a double duty in visualization. You see the future, you attract the future, and also you actually know what you're saving for.
Exactly. Some people may be planning to move to a different country, which may be cheaper. That's going to affect their retirement number. Some people want to continue to work in some form. That's going to affect your retirement number. So really get a visual of what you want your retirement to look like, because that's going to be a huge factor in how much it's going to cost.
Oh yeah, if you're Indian, you've probably heard this many times. Oh, we're going to go back to India. You know, there's this dream to go back there. And actually, we've seen a lot of people in our family do that. They'll spend some time in India. That's a lot of times a lower cost of living than being in the US. But sometimes they're there and they realize that they miss paper towels, as my mom says. And she pops their way back to the US. So it's good to start visualizing and think, would I want to be there all the time? Do I want to be on a boat doing cruises all year? Do I want to be gardening? Do I want to be working? All of that is going to affect how much money you need at retirement.
The second tip they had, which is probably my favorite tip, identify your retirement numbers. Michelle, which numbers do you think are important for people to know?
I would reference the Trinity study and the 4% rule.
Thank you, Trinity College.
Is that where it's from?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I thought it was the Holy Trinity. Came down and said, save money and invest in the S&P 500 and then only take out 4% and whatever you can live off of forever. I would say, though, more simply, the best numbers to know are what's your net worth and what are you spending each month?
Ooh, yes. I had spending, annual spending, so similar, what you're spending each month. Your FI number, that's your retirement number. Annual spending times 25. That's the number that comes from the Trinity study, which we'll link to. That number, once you know how much you need, whether it's 850,000, 500,000, 1 million, 2 million, more than that, when you know that number, you actually know where you're going. Otherwise, you're just like, I need to save a lot of money. That's just not helpful for anybody.
It's not very motivating, to be honest. Like when you are like, should I save or buy the fancy car? If you don't have a reason, you're going to go with the fancy car and then feel guilty about it. Like, maybe I should be saving, but what am I saving for anyway?
Now, the piece did not mention this number, but I think this number's huge. And do you know what number I'm talking about, Michelle? A number that I love. A number that's not your FI number, but does change your life.
Your net worth?
Nope. Another number I love, though.
What else? What other numbers do you love? 777?
I'm talking about the Coast FI number.
Oh, yes.
Mm-hmm. So your Coast FI number is how much money you need to have invested, assuming that if you didn't spend another dime today, you would have the money that you need when you retire.
I love this, Amy. I'm going to pause you right there for a quick clarification because I think this is super important. We're talking about how much money you need to retire. You find that out by looking at how much money you're spending each month and then using your real spending data to say, okay, if I start saving money, if I start investing in something like an index fund, then I know that I can pull from that and I would never have to work again. To contrast, the Coast FI number is looking at that same investment, but realizing that you could maybe stop investing money and it's going to grow to the amount that you want. But if you can cover your expenses by working a job that covers your bills, then you're still in a good place because you're not taking money out of your investments or your savings.
So have you hit Coast FI already?
Depends on the day, Sammy.
We'll put a calculator in the show notes so that you can see if you're Coast FI or not. That could really affect how your day-to-day goes. You might not need to be making as much money as you think you need to, and that could change your lifestyle a lot.
Sammy, if I could throw in a tip here then.
Yes.
One thing I do find now that I'm in my 30s, I can focus more on paying my bills and a little bit less on saving for retirement, especially as I'm pursuing more careers that I'm passionate about. Part of the reason I can do that is because when I was in my 20s, I didn't know a lot about money, but I was just putting money into my 401k. I was just maxing it out. And I think the thing that I didn't appreciate when I was in my 20s, but I'm so happy I did it, is I didn't appreciate the appreciation, the compounding. The younger you are, sooner you can start investing money, the sooner you can take advantage of that compounding. And if you do it at age 20 instead of age 30, instead of age 40, you're getting 10, 20 more years of compounding. And put in a compound calculator, that's literally hundreds of thousands of dollars.
That's why compound interest is the eighth wonder of the world, Michelle. And I agree with you. I was looking at this piece and I thought the same thing. I was thinking, truthfully, I think if most people, based on their spending, obviously it's very individual, but I think for most people, if they max out their 401k for like 5 to 10 years in their 20s, they will probably not have to invest another dime for their retirement and will be perfectly fine and maybe beyond fine. Obviously, that is highly individual and you have to look at your own numbers, but time makes such a huge difference. If you're not in your 20s anymore, like Michelle and I aren't, find a 20-year-old and tell them about compound interest and tell them to max out their retirement accounts because it will make them a millionaire.
It's such a gift, especially since in your 20s, it's more likely that you don't have kids yet. It's more likely that you don't have big expenses like a home. I think you can still enjoy your life in your 20s and also save a lot of money in a compounding vehicle.
This next tip I wanted to bring up because this is a common one that you may see in different pieces, different places on the internet. And it is useful, but I wanted to point out a word of caution. This wealth management group also added considering insurance, like life insurance, disability insurance, long-term care coverage, auto, home, umbrella life policies. Very reasonable recommendation, but here's the thing about insurance policies. You have to do your research because this is how these kind of companies make their money. It's from the fees on their mutual fund accounts and their fees on the management of those accounts and insurance policies, especially different types of life insurance policies. Of course, if you have children and things like that, life insurance may be very appropriate, but try to get an objective source to see what kind of life insurance will be best for you.
Yeah.
If it were me, personal recommendation, whenever I'm worried about getting into a scam on accident, I like to go to the Choose FI Facebook group, the main one, and just post my concern there. Like, hey, I'm looking into a life insurance policy. What should I consider? It's a bunch of finance nerds, and they're going to help you avoid some serious mistakes. So when it comes to insurance, do a little double check because insurance is made to profit the insurance company. So do a double check to make sure you're not signing up for something that's unnecessary or going to overcharge you.
I love that piece of advice, Amy. That's exactly what you did when our parents were trying to look into long-term care insurance. You went online and asked some nerds who have absolutely no benefit recommending anything other than what they know. And we got good advice. We found out it wasn't necessarily a scam, but also might not be a good fit for us.
Yes, exactly. Next tip was specifically made for people age 50 to 62. And I wanted to bring it up because this is the one that relates back to our mom and her finances.
Our mom, and also now she hears so many people her age coming to her and saying, I'm starting too late. And so that's why we think it's so important because you can only start where you're at, but you still have so much opportunity.
The tip is catch up if you need to. And this is what I like to think about. A lot of times people in their 20s can invest maybe like 5% of their income, and that's going to be quite a bit when they turn 65. But if you're older, you just have to invest a larger percentage so that you can catch up in a shorter amount of time. It's not the end of the world, and compound interest can be surprising. Some aggressive saving and investing can still get you there. It does not mean you are totally screwed at all, not even a little.
I think we've been surprised, honestly, at how late people can start and still end up setting themselves up well. When we have money fears or we think we're behind, we just avoid the problem. So there's like this underlying anxiety, and to be honest, that's why a lot of people in the United States retire without enough money, which is super, super sad. But the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is today. And no matter what you do, you can definitely set yourself up for success in the future.
Last tip for those age 62 plus and me, because I just found out about these recently and was nerding out on them pretty hard. I'm talking about required minimum distributions. At a certain age, which may change by the time you get to this age, based on government policies.
Thanks, Sam.
The government requires you to take out a portion of your tax advantage retirement accounts. So they will force you to take out some money. It's called a required minimum distribution. They will force you to take out some money, and that money could be taxed.
Wow.
This is something that I didn't appreciate. As somebody who's been aggressively investing into my retirement accounts, I was looking at how much money I would have at that time and how much they would make me take out. And I was quite appalled because I'm like, I don't want to pay tax on like $80,000 or $100,000 if that's not even what I spend during the year, but I'm forced to take that out and then pay taxes on it. Just something to keep in mind. It's not going to affect most people, but just be mindful of when you're going to have to take that out and how much you're going to be taxed on. It may be a reason to even start moving some money into post-tax accounts so that you won't have to be taxed later if you have a lot invested into your retirement accounts.
I love that, Sammy. And I think in general, no matter what age you are, but definitely I think as you get older or as you start to have more money in different places, it's good to be aware of what the consequences are if you take money out at a certain period of time, how much money you're putting in one vehicle, if there are better options for diversifying, all of that, again, tied to education. I also didn't know about the RMDs until like last year. So those type of things are super helpful to learn about. And did we learn about that at Camp Fi?
I believe we did. A reason to go to events like Camp Fi where you can just nerd out with a bunch of money nerds and figure some of this stuff out.
Shout out Camp Fi.
Shout out.
Takeaways.
Michelle, I think the biggest takeaway from all of these tips is 1, have a plan, have a vision of what you want your retirement to look like, and 2, start. I think those are honestly the 2 biggest takeaways. I think that's what people are intimidated by, what they don't want to face on their own, and I think that's what's going to make the biggest difference for their future.
I want to say too, if you're listening to this at whatever age you're at, and you're thinking, I can't learn that. I can't understand that. That's so difficult. I haven't done anything. I haven't really thought about this. Don't let it stress you out. You have the capacity to learn. It's actually not that difficult. There's only a couple of key things you need to learn. If you can just be savvy about how much money you're spending, being aware of that number, knowing how much money you'd like to have in retirement, starting to think about what your retirement could look like at whatever age you want to retire, you are already going to put yourself on the right track.
Community time!
Before we say goodbye, it's our community time.
We are loving the comments from all of you from our episode, Are You in a Season of Yes or a Season of No? We got a beautiful email from Masha. She said, totally relate to these seasons. When I was just starting my business, I was in a total season of yes. And as things picked up in my business and we grew and got busier, now the seasons have shifted to if it's not a heck yes, it's a no. I love this because I really think it can change, and it's just knowing about what season you're in.
Paul and Harris also loved that episode. And Harris is in a season of yes to the right things right now.
I love that. Paul said that he's in a season of yes to all things. And Hyperfocus commented and said, we are grateful you are saying yes to us. We say yes to you too. It's true. We go to all of these meetups with Paul and Harris. We are so excited to spend time with them because they're people we know have such a great influence on us. Which brings me to comments from episode 176, the 5 parasocial people you surround yourself with. This episode we've just been constantly getting great feedback on. Jennifer, shout out from my sabbatical group. We did our sabbatical course reunion, and she said she's been listening to the podcast, and she specifically referenced the 5 parasocial people you surround yourself with. She said she's trying to be mindful about who that is, and then also me and Sammy are a part of that. So hi, Jennifer. Thanks so much.
Also, shout out to Anne, who is the wife of Chris, who leads our manifestation group. She has been listening to the podcast. We really appreciate that. Thanks to Luca for telling his daughter, a fellow Scorpio, about the Build a Wealthy Spirit podcast. she was asking us about it as well.
Luca, thank you so much. Every time we go to a party of yours or we meet your friends, they ask us about our podcast. So thank you so much for sharing. Thank you, Kate and Sage, for the shout out on Social Room podcast. We'll link to the podcast on our newsletter.
Fellow Charlestonians, I don't know if we can call ourselves that, but they are fellow Charlestonian podcasters, and they have an amazing podcast where they interview local Charleston entrepreneurs. So we'll definitely link to that in the show notes.
And final shout out to Kat. She said that the Daily Podcast had an episode about fire, which we'll share, but she said they should have had us on.
If you know somebody who's talking about fire and you want us to speak on it, we're happy to. Let us know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if you're at the New York Times, if you're at the Atlantic, if you're at Business Insider, your newsletter, we're happy to come on and chat about fire, share what we know. BuildAWealthySpirit.com. And let us know what you thought about this episode. Are there any tips that you at your age would give someone who's thinking about retiring? Let us know. BuildAWealthySpirit.com.
And most importantly, be sure to join us next week as we put down the rule book and we rethink the status quo.